The stars looked the same as always through the bridge windows of the UES Taeguk, cold and distant points of light scattered across the black void of space. Captain Lee Do-hyun stood with his hands behind his back, watching the endless darkness that surrounded their ship as it moved through the outer edge of human territory. He had been doing this patrol route for 3 years now, and nothing ever changed out here. The same empty space, the same silent radio channels, the same daily reports back to Earth Command that said absolutely nothing was happening. Do-hyun was a tall man with dark hair that was starting to show gray at the temples, even though he was only 35 years old. The stress of commanding a deep space vessel did that to people. His uniform was crisp and clean, the blue and white colors of the United Earth Space Service looking sharp under the bridge lights. Behind him, his crew worked quietly at their stations, monitoring systems and scanning space for anything unusual. The bridge of the Taeguk was not very large, but it held everything they needed. 6 workstations arranged in a circle around the captain's chair, each one glowing with screens and displays that showed different information about the ship and the space around it. The walls were a soft gray color, and the lighting was kept dim to make it easier to see the displays. It was a working space, built for function rather than beauty. Communications Officer Park Ji-won sat at her station near the front of the bridge, wearing the same blue uniform as everyone else. She was younger than the captain, maybe 28, with short black hair and quick hands that moved across her control panels with practiced ease. She had been monitoring the radio frequencies for hours now, listening to the same empty static that they heard every day. But today was going to be different. "Captain," Ji-won said suddenly, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the bridge, "I'm picking up something strange on the long-range communications array." Do-hyun turned away from the windows and walked over to her station. "What kind of something?" Ji-won frowned at her screens, adjusting controls and filters to try to make sense of what she was seeing. "It looks like a signal, but it's not coming from any of our ships or stations. The frequency is completely unknown, and it's heavily encrypted. Where is it coming from?" Do-hyun asked, leaning over her shoulder to look at the displays. "That's the weird part," Ji-won said. "It's coming from the Vega sector, way beyond our territory. No human ships should be out there." Chief Technical Officer Kim Min-ho looked up from his station on the other side of the bridge. He was a stocky man with thick-rimmed glasses and hands that were always stained with grease from working on the ship's systems. "Want me to take a look at that encryption?" Do-hyun nodded. "Do it. I want to know what we're dealing with here." Min-ho got up from his station and walked over to join them at the communications console. He plugged a small device into one of the ports and started typing commands into his handheld computer. Numbers and symbols flowed across his screen as he worked, trying different methods to break through the encryption that protected the mysterious signal. "This is going to take some time," Min-ho said after a few minutes. "Whatever this is, it's using a completely different encryption system than anything we've ever seen. The mathematics behind it are really complex." "Keep working on it," Do-hyun said. He walked back to his captain's chair and sat down, thinking about what this could mean. In all the years that humans had been traveling in space, they had never encountered any evidence of other intelligent life. Earth was alone in the galaxy as far as anyone knew. But if this signal was really coming from outside human space, and if it was encrypted, that meant someone else was out there. The next 2 hours passed slowly as Min-ho worked on breaking the encryption. The other crew members continued their regular duties, but everyone kept glancing over at the technical officer as he muttered to himself and typed commands into his computer. Finally, he looked up with the excited expression on his face. "Got it," Min-ho said. "The signal is definitely artificial, and I've managed to decode most of it. Captain, you need to hear this." Do-hyun stood up and walked back over to the communication station. "Put it on the speakers." Min-ho pressed a button, and suddenly the bridge was filled with a sound unlike anything any of them had ever heard before. It was clearly a voice, but not a human voice. The tone was higher and had a musical quality to it, like crystal chimes mixed with wind through trees. But even though the voice was alien, the desperation in it was something that anyone could understand. "This is Christus Prime Harmony of the Althari Confederation. the voice said through the ship's translation systems. Our worlds are under attack by the Krovar Empire. Our defenses have failed, our ships are destroyed, our people are dying. We broadcast this message to any civilization that might receive it. Please, if you can hear this, we need help. We offer our greatest scientific knowledge in exchange for military assistance. Our homeworld will fall within days. This message will repeat until our transmitters are destroyed. The bridge fell silent as the message ended, and then started repeating itself. Everyone stared at each other, trying to process what they had just heard. First contact with an alien species, and it was a cry for help from beings who were about to be wiped out by other aliens. How long has this signal been transmitting? Do-Hyun asked quietly. Ji-won checked her instruments. Based on the signal degradation and the distance it traveled, I estimate it's been broadcasting for about 6 days. That means they might already be dead, said Navigation Officer Song Nari, a woman with sharp eyes and steady hands who had been listening from her station. Do-Hyun sat back down in his chair and stared at the main display screen, which now showed a rough map of the galaxy with the signal's origin point marked with a red dot. It was so far away from Earth, farther than any human had ever traveled. Getting there would take weeks even with their fastest ships, and they had no idea what they would find when they arrived. Sir, Ji-won said carefully, what do we do? That was the question, wasn't it? Do-Hyun thought about his orders, which were to patrol this sector of space and report anything unusual back to Earth Command. This was definitely unusual. But by the time he sent a message back to Earth and waited for orders, the aliens who had sent this distress call would probably be dead. He thought about the voice in that message, the desperation and fear that had carried across the vast emptiness of space. Someone out there was dying, and they had asked for help from anyone who could hear them. As a human, as a member of a species that had survived and thrived on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy, Do-Hyun felt something deep in his chest respond to that call for help. Minho, he said finally, prepare a message burst to Earth Command. Full encryption. Tell them we've made contact with alien life and that we're responding to a distress call. Include all the data we've collected. Sir, Navigation Officer Nari said, responding to this call means going way beyond our patrol zone. We'd be violating our orders. Do-Hyun stood up and looked around at his crew. These were good people, humans who had chosen to spend their lives in the dangerous emptiness of space, protecting Earth and exploring the unknown. He knew what choice they would make. Sometimes, he said, doing the right thing means breaking the rules. Set course for the Vega sector, maximum speed. As the Taeguk changed course and accelerated toward unknown space, Do-Hyun sent his message to Earth and then transmitted a response to the alien distress call. It was a simple message. This is Captain Lee Do-Hyun of the human vessel Taeguk. We have received your distress call and are coming to help. Hold on. For the first time in human history, Earth's children were no longer alone in the universe. The message from Captain Do-Hyun reached Earth Command exactly 18 hours and 37 minutes after the Taeguk had changed course toward the Vega sector. The quantum communication burst traveled faster than any ship could fly, carrying with it the most important news in human history. We are not alone in the universe. Admiral Choi Sun-hee was in her office on Luna Station when the priority alert came through her personal communicator. She had been reviewing fleet deployment reports and drinking her third cup of coffee of the day when the device on her desk started flashing red and making the urgent tone that meant someone needed her attention immediately. Choi was a woman who had worked her way up through the ranks of the space service over 25 years, and she had never seen a priority alpha message before. She opened the message and read it twice before she fully understood what Do-Hyun was telling her. Aliens existed. They were at war. One species was asking for help, and one of her captains had decided to respond without waiting for orders. Get me the emergency council, Choi said to her assistant through the intercom. Full assembly, right now. Within 2 hours, the most important people in human space were gathered in the secure conference room, deep inside Luna Station. The room had no windows, just gray walls and a large table surrounded by chairs. The people who sat in those chairs, made the decisions that affected 12 billion humans living across 43 worlds. Dr. Yoon Hajin was the first to speak after Admiral Choi had finished reading Captain Do-hyun's message to the group. Yoon was Earth's leading expert on the possibility of alien life, though until today it had all been theoretical. He was a thin man with gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. The biological data included in this message is fascinating, Yoon said, looking down at his tablet. These Althari appear to be silicon-based life forms with crystalline internal structures. Their bone analogs are made of something similar to quartz, and their circulatory system uses a liquid metal compound instead of blood. What does that mean in practical terms? Asked General Park Hyun-sik, commander of the Marine Corps. It means they're beautiful but incredibly fragile, Yoon replied. Based on these readings, the average Althari would break bones just from the gravity on Earth. A human child could probably kill one of them by accident. Intelligence Director Kang Seo-jin looked up from the data pad she had been studying. She was a woman who made it her business to know things that other people wanted to keep secret. And right now she was learning about an entire galaxy full of secrets. The information about these Krovar is more concerning, Kang said. According to the Althari data, they're a reptilian species with natural armor plating and superior individual strength. They've conquered 17 different star systems in the past 50 years. Their military doctrine is based on overwhelming force and the belief that weaker species should serve stronger ones. How do they compare to humans? Admiral Choi asked. Kang smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. That's where things get interesting. Cross-referencing the physical data with our own capabilities, it appears that humans fall somewhere in the middle. We're not as fragile as the Althari, but not as individually strong as the Krovar. So we can't help, General Park said. On the contrary, Kang replied. We might be the only species in the galaxy who can help. You see, there's something the rest of the galaxy doesn't understand about us. Something they don't have any reference for. She stood up and activated the large display screen at the end of the room. Images of Earth appeared, showing storms that could level cities, earthquakes that could split continents, and animals that could kill a human in dozens of different ways. Earth is what xenobiologists classify as a Class 12 death world, Kangi continued. Most inhabited planets in the galaxy are Class 3 or 4. The Althari homeworld is a Class 1. The difference is that on Earth everything is trying to kill us all the time. The weather, the geology, the other animals, even the plants and bacteria. Humans evolved in an environment so hostile that just surviving to adulthood makes us incredibly tough by galactic standards. Dr. Yoon nodded in agreement. The psychological profiles we can extrapolate from the alien data suggest that most galactic species evolved in relatively peaceful environments. They developed intelligence and technology, but they never developed the kind of aggressive cooperation that humans use for warfare. They fight as individuals, not as coordinated groups. Which brings us to the real question, Admiral Choi said. What do we do about this? The room fell quiet as everyone considered the options. They could ignore the situation entirely and hope that it didn't affect human space. They could send a small diplomatic mission to make contact, but avoid getting involved in alien wars. Or they could do something that no human military had ever done before, deploy their entire fleet to fight in a war that wasn't theirs. Fleet Admiral Ryu Ji-sung, who had been quiet up until now, finally spoke. He was the man responsible for coordinating all human military spacecraft, and he understood better than anyone what their capabilities were. If we're going to do this, Ryu said, we need to do it right. Half measures won't work against an empire that has conquered 17 star systems. We need to send a force that will make them think twice about continuing this war. What are you suggesting? Admiral Choi asked. I'm suggesting we send everything, Ryu replied. Every ship, every fighter, every marine, the entire human fleet. General, Park leaned forward in his chair. That would leave Earth and the colonies completely defenseless. No, Ryu said. It would send a message to the galaxy that humans don't do anything halfway. When we decide to fight, we fight with everything we have. Captain Nam Yo-jin, who commanded the assault carrier Seoul, had been listening to the discussion with growing Excitement. She was a woman who had joined the space service because she wanted to explore the unknown, and this was about as unknown as things could get. The psychological impact alone would be enormous, Nam said. Imagine you're a species that fights wars with maybe 100 ships at most, and suddenly you're facing over 2,000 human vessels. Even if our individual ships aren't superior, the sheer scale would be terrifying. Marine Colonel Baytewin nodded in agreement. He was a man who had spent his entire adult life training soldiers for wars that might never come, and now he was looking at the biggest war in human history. My Marines are ready, Bay said simply. We've been training for hostile environment, combat our entire careers. If these Krovar want to fight humans on the ground, they're going to learn what a mistake that is. Admiral Choi looked around the table at the faces of the people who would make this decision a reality. They were all humans, all products of the same hostile world that had made their species tough enough to survive anything the galaxy could throw at them. There's another consideration, Dr. Yoon said quietly. If we do this, if we reveal ourselves to the galaxy and deploy our entire military, we can never go back to being unknown. Every species out there will know that Earth exists and that humans are capable of projecting power across interstellar distances. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Intelligence Director Kang asked. Maybe it's time the galaxy knew that Deathworlders have joined the community of intelligent species. Admiral Choi stood up and walked over to the display screen, which now showed a tactical map of known space with the location of the Althari systems marked in red. The distance was enormous, the risks were unknown, and the consequences would change human history forever. Gentlemen, ladies, she said, turning back to face the group. We're about to make a decision that will define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. Are we the kind of species that ignores calls for help because it's not our problem? Or are we the kind of species that fights for those who can't fight for themselves? The vote was unanimous. 3 hours later, Admiral Choi issued the order that would mobilize every human military asset for Operation Deathworld response. Every ship that could fly, every Marine that could fight, every pilot that could navigate the dark between stars would be heading toward a war that most of them had never imagined possible. As the orders went out across human space and ships began moving toward assembly points, Admiral Choi sat in her office and sent a personal message to Captain Do-hyun on the Taeguk. Help is coming, the message said. All of it. The Taeguk dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Althari system and immediately began scanning for signs of life. What Captain Do-hyun saw on his displays made his stomach drop. The space around the 3 inhabited planets was filled with the debris of destroyed ships, and burning cities could be seen on the surface of the worlds below. My God, whispered Communications Officer Park Ji-won as she studied the sensor readings. There are hundreds of enemy ships out there. The Krovar fleet was massive, far larger than anything the crew of the Taeguk had imagined. The alien warships were dark and angular, covered with armor plating that made them look like predators even when they were sitting still. They had surrounded the Althari worlds in a loose formation that allowed them to destroy anything trying to escape while maintaining their blockade. Captain, said Chief Technical Officer Kim Min-ho, I'm detecting survivors on the surface of the second planet. The Althari are still broadcasting, but the signal is much weaker than before. Do-hyun nodded grimly. Open a channel to them. The voice that came through the communications system was the same musical tone they had heard in the distress call, but now it was filled with exhaustion and despair. Unknown vessel, the alien voice said. Please identify yourself. If you are here to help us, you should know that resistance is hopeless. The Krovar have destroyed most of our population centers, and our military is gone. This is Captain Lee, Do-hyun of the human vessel. Taeguk, Do-hyun replied. We received your distress call and came as quickly as we could. What is your current situation? There was a long pause before the alien responded, and when the voice came back, it sounded confused and hopeful at the same time. Humans? We have no record of your species in our databases. I am Christus Prime Harmony, commander of the last functioning Althari defense station. Captain Do-hyun, you should know that we are facing complete extinction. The Krovar have over 300 warships in this system, and they are systematically destroying our cities to force our surrender. Do-hyun looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were outnumbered more than 200 to 1, facing an enemy that had already destroyed an entire civilization. Any reasonable person would retreat and wait for reinforcements. But humans, Do-hyun realized, were not always reasonable. "HFY Harmony," he said. "We're going to get you out of this. Can you coordinate with us to identify priority targets?" "Captain," Navigation Officer Song Nari said quietly. "Are we really going to attack? There are so many of them." Do-hyun smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "Nari, we're humans. We evolved on a planet where everything tried to kill us every single day. Do you think a few hundred alien ships are going to scare us?" The crew of the Taeguk began preparing for battle with the calm efficiency that came from years of training. They had drilled for combat scenarios countless times, though none of them had ever imagined their first real battle would be against aliens in a star system light years from home. Tactical Officer Song Nari began identifying targets among the Krovar fleet, looking for command ships and vessels that were positioned to threaten the surviving Althari population centers. Weapons Officer Lee Dong-hyuk powered up the ship's missile launchers and energy cannons, systems that had been designed to fight other human vessels but would work just as well against alien targets. "HFY Harmony," Do-hyun said over the communications channel. "We're going to need you to do exactly what we tell you. Can your remaining ships follow our lead?" "Captain Do-hyun," the alien replied. "I have only 3 vessels left, and they are exploration ships with minimal weapons. But we will follow your instructions." The Krovar had noticed the Taeguk by now, and several of their ships were moving to intercept the unknown vessel. The aliens had no idea what they were dealing with, but they approached with the confidence of a species that had conquered 17 star systems without meeting serious resistance. What happened next would be studied by military historians for centuries. The Taeguk accelerated directly toward the center of the Krovar fleet, moving at a speed that should have been suicidal. But instead of trying to fight the enemy ships one by one, Captain Do-hyun did something that no galactic species had ever attempted. He turned his ship into a guided missile. "All hands, prepare for ramming speed," Do-hyun announced over the ship's intercom. The human ship dove through the Krovar formation like a sword through paper, its shields deflecting enemy fire while its weapons destroyed everything in its path. The Krovar ships were individually larger and better armored than the Taeguk, but they were designed to fight enemies that followed predictable tactics. They had never faced an opponent that would deliberately fly into the middle of their formation and start shooting in all directions. "Target the command ship," Do-hyun ordered. "Nari, put us right next to that big one in the center." The Taeguk's weapons opened fire at point-blank range, hitting the Krovar command vessel with enough firepower to crack its armor and disable its main systems. But instead of retreating after the attack, the human ship did something even more shocking. It began launching boarding pods. Marine Sergeant Oh Min-seok led the first human boarding action in history, taking 12 of his soldiers through the hull of the Krovar command ship. The aliens inside had no idea what to expect, but they found out quickly that humans were very different from the species they had conquered before. The interior of the Krovar ship was dark and hot, designed for reptilian creatures that preferred high temperatures. The corridors were wide and tall, built for beings that were larger than humans. But size meant nothing when the Krovar warriors found themselves facing opponents who moved like pack hunters and fought with weapons that could kill at long range. "They're coordinating their attacks," one of the Krovar warriors managed to report over his communicator before Sergeant O's squad eliminated his position. "They fight as a group, not as individuals." The psychological impact on the Krovar was immediate and devastating. They were used to combat being a test of individual strength and courage, but the humans fought as a single organism. When one Marine was wounded, his squad mates covered him while he retreated. When they encountered heavy resistance, they used grenades and explosives to clear the area before advancing. Most terrifyingly, they seemed to know where their enemies, or even when they couldn't see them, working together with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural. "How are they doing that?" demanded Krovar ship leader Vextar, as he watched his warriors being systematically eliminated by the human boarding party. "It's like they can read each other's minds." What the Crovar didn't understand was that humans had evolved in small groups on a world where cooperation meant survival and competition meant death. They could read body language, facial expressions, and vocal tones with an accuracy that allowed them to coordinate without speaking. To aliens who had evolved as solitary hunters, it looked like magic. Meanwhile, the Teguk continued its attack on the Crovar fleet, using tactics that violated every rule of galactic warfare. Instead of maintaining a safe distance and exchanging fire, the human ship moved in close and used its superior maneuverability to avoid enemy weapons while delivering devastating attacks at short range. "Captain," Weapons Officer Lee reported, "We've destroyed 12 enemy vessels and disabled 6 others, but our shields are down to 40% and we're taking heavy damage." "How much longer until the reinforcements arrive?" Do-hyun asked. Communications Officer Park checked her instruments. "Admiral Choi's message said they would be here in 6 days." "Then we hold for 6 days," Do-hyun said simply. The battle continued. For 18 hours as the single human ship fought against impossible odds, the Crovar kept expecting the Teguk to retreat or surrender, but the humans just kept fighting. Every time it looked like the human ship was about to be destroyed, it would do something unexpected that turned the battle around. Finally, as the Crovar fleet began to pull back to regroup and figure out how to deal with this new enemy, SciFistories Harmony contacted the Teguk with amazement in his voice. "Captain Do-hyun," the Althari commander said, "you have accomplished the impossible. You have driven off a force more than 200 times your size and saved thousands of my people. What manner of beings are you humans?" Do-hyun looked around. His bridge at his exhausted crew, all of them covered in sweat and working frantically to repair the damage their ship had taken. They were tired, scared, and a long way from home, but they were still fighting. "We're the kind of beings who don't give up," Do-hyun replied. "And we're the kind who keep our promises. Help is coming, SciFistories Harmony, all of it." As if summoned by his words, long-range sensors detected the first elements of the human fleet beginning to arrive at the edge of the system. Over 2,000 human warships carrying the entire military might of a species that the galaxy was about to meet for the first time. The Crovar intercepted the human communications and heard Admiral Choi's voice as she addressed her fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Choi. We are here to end this war and show the galaxy what happens when someone threatens innocent people. Let's remind these aliens why Earth is called a death world." The arrival of the human fleet changed everything in the Althari system. Over 2,000 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their engines burning like new stars against the darkness of space. The Crovar had never seen anything like it in their centuries of conquest, and for the first time in their military history, they felt something they had never experienced before: fear. Admiral Choi Sun-hee stood on the bridge of her flagship, the massive dreadnought, Gangnung, and studied the tactical display that showed the positions of both fleets. The Crovar had pulled their ships into a defensive formation around the 3 Althari worlds, clearly hoping to use the civilian populations as shields. It was a tactic that had worked for them before against other species, but they were about to learn that humans had very different ideas about acceptable losses. "Fleet Admiral Ryu," Choi said into her communications headset, "deploy all fighter squadrons. I want every Crovar ship identified and targeted before we begin the main assault." Fleet Admiral Ryu Ji-sung was commanding the operation from the carrier, Group Incheon, and his ships immediately began launching fighters. The human pilots had trained for this moment their entire careers, though they had never imagined their first combat mission would be against an alien enemy in a distant star system. Squadron leader Han Minji led the first wave of fighters toward the Crovar fleet, her small craft moving through space with a grace that made the alien ships look clumsy by comparison. Human fighters were designed to operate in Earth's turbulent atmosphere and chaotic magnetic field, which meant they could perform maneuvers in 3-dimensional space that no other galactic species had ever attempted. "All fighters, this is Lid," Minji said over the squadron communication channel. "Remember your training and watch each other's backs. We're about to show these aliens what human pilots can do." The Crovar launched their own fighters to intercept the human attack, but they quickly discovered that their pilots were no match for beings who had evolved to hunt flying prey in three-dimensional space. Human fighter pilots could track multiple targets simultaneously, execute complex maneuvers while under heavy fire, and coordinate their attacks with a precision that seemed impossible to aliens who fought as individuals. They're everywhere. One Krovar pilot managed to report before Han Minji's squadron destroyed his fighter. How are they moving like that? What the Krovar didn't understand was that human pilots had learned to fly by fighting against Earth's weather systems, which were far more unpredictable and dangerous than anything in space. Storms that could change direction in seconds, wind patterns that could tear aircraft apart, and atmospheric conditions that required constant adjustment had made human pilots incredibly adaptable. Fighting against alien spacecraft that moved in predictable patterns was almost easy by comparison. While the fighters engaged in their deadly dance, the main human fleet began its approach toward the Krovar positions. The alien commanders watched in growing alarm as the human ships moved in formations that violated every rule of galactic warfare. Instead of maintaining safe distances and exchanging long-range fire, the humans were planning to fight at close range where their superior training and coordination would give them the greatest advantage. Krovar Supreme War Leader Grextar commanded the alien fleet from his massive fortress ship, a vessel larger than most human cities. He had conquered 17 star systems with this fleet, and had never met an enemy that could stand against the combined might of the Krovar Empire. But as he watched the human ships approach, he felt something cold growing in his chest. All ships, Grextar commanded over the fleet communication system, maintain formation and prepare for standard engagement. These unknown aliens may have numbers, but we have superior firepower and armor. The first exchange of fire between the two fleets lit up the space around the Althari worlds like a miniature star going nova. The Krovar weapons were powerful, and their ships were heavily armored, but they were designed for fighting enemies who followed conventional tactics. The humans did nothing conventionally. Human destroyers dove directly into the Krovar formation like wolves attacking a herd, using their speed and maneuverability to avoid the heaviest weapons while targeting the alien ship's weak points. Human cruisers provided covering fire with weapons that could punch through Krovar armor at close range, and human dreadnoughts advanced like mountains of metal and fury, their massive guns turning enemy vessels into expanding clouds of debris. They're not fighting like any species we've encountered before, Krovar fleet leader Dexmore reported to his supreme commander. They're willing to take casualties that would be unacceptable to any civilized military. It's like they don't care if their ships are destroyed as long as they can destroy ours first. What the Krovar were seeing was the human approach to warfare that had been developed over thousands of years of fighting on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. Humans understood that sometimes the best way to minimize casualties was to fight so aggressively that the enemy couldn't respond effectively. They were willing to sacrifice individual ships if it meant saving the overall fleet and completing their mission. The space battle raged for hours as the two fleets tore each other apart with weapons that could destroy planets. But gradually the superior human tactics and coordination began to tell. The Krovar had more individual firepower, but the humans fought as a single organism, with each ship supporting the others in ways that the aliens couldn't counter. "Admiral," reported Captain Nam Yojin from the assault carrier Seoul, "we're ready to begin ground operations. Colonel Bay's Marines are standing by for planetary assault." Admiral Choi looked at the tactical display, which showed that the human fleet had broken through the Krovar orbital defenses and was now in position to begin landing troops on the Althari worlds. The alien ground forces had been using the civilian population as human shields, but that tactic was about to backfire in ways they never expected. "Begin the landing," Choi ordered. Marine Colonel Bei Taewan had been preparing for this moment since the fleet left Earth. His Marines were the best trained soldiers in human space, and they were about to face their first alien enemy. As the transport ships descended toward the surface of the Althari homeworld, Bei addressed his troops over the communication system. "Marines," he said, "today we fight not just for humanity, but for innocent beings who asked for our help. The Krovar think they're stronger than us because they have natural armor and superior individual strength. They're about to learn that war isn't about individual combat. It's about teamwork, tactics, and the willingness to do whatever it takes to protect those who can't protect themselves. The first human Marines to land on an alien world did so under heavy fire from Krovar ground forces who had fortified themselves in the ruins of Althari cities. The alien warriors were individually larger and stronger than humans, with natural armor plating that could deflect small arms fire. But they had never faced an enemy that used combined arms tactics, air support, and squad-level coordination. Incoming. Krovar Patrol 200 meters north, reported Sergeant Kim Yojin over the Tactical Communication Network. 12 hostiles moving in single file. Roger that, replied Lieutenant Park Minseo, who was coordinating the air support. Gunships are inbound. Mark your positions and take cover. The human attack helicopters that swept over the battlefield were unlike anything the Krovar had ever seen. They moved low and fast, using the terrain to avoid enemy fire while delivering precision strikes against alien positions. The Krovar had weapons that could bring down aircraft, but they couldn't target enemies that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. How are they coordinating these attacks? Demanded Krovar ground leader Trixval as he watched his positions being systematically destroyed by human forces. Every unit seems to know exactly where every other unit is located. The answer was something the Krovar couldn't understand, because it was so foreign to their way of thinking. Human soldiers had been trained from childhood to work together, to sacrifice individual glory for team success, and to trust their lives to their squad mates. They shared information instantly, coordinated their movements without hesitation, and fought with a unity that made them far more effective than the sum of their individual capabilities. As the battle on the ground continued, more and more Krovar positions fell to the advancing human forces. The aliens had expected to face an enemy that would fight individual duels and could be defeated through superior strength and armor. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that used artillery, airstrikes, flanking maneuvers, and squad tactics to turn every engagement into an overwhelming assault against which their individual advantages meant nothing. Supreme War Leader, reported Fleet Leader Dexmore from his damaged ship. Our ground forces are being systematically destroyed. These humans fight like nothing we've ever encountered. They seem to know our positions before we move, and they coordinate their attacks with a precision that suggests a hive mind. Grextar looked at the tactical displays that showed his once mighty fleet being torn apart by human ships that fought with a savagery he had never seen. His ground forces were being pushed back on all three worlds, and his space fleet was losing ships faster than they could be replaced. For the 3 months after the liberation of Althari space, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The news of humanity's intervention had spread across thousands of star systems, carried by traders, diplomats, and refugees who had witnessed the battle. For the first time in galactic history, a species had deployed their entire military to protect strangers who had asked for help. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session on the neutral world of Nexus Prime, a planet that had served as a meeting place for different species for over 1,000 years. The Great Assembly Hall was filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds, all of them trying to understand what the emergence of humanity meant for galactic civilization. Ambassador Shin Johan sat at the human delegation table, looking calm despite the fact that he was surrounded by dozens of alien species who were debating whether his people should be welcomed or destroyed. He was a man who had spent his career in diplomatic service, but until 3 months ago, all of his negotiations had been with other humans. Now he was humanity's voice in a galaxy that was still trying to decide what to make of Deathworlders. The question before this council is simple, declared Councillor Vexi Thera, a representative of the Hegemony Coalition. Are these humans a force for stability in the galaxy? Or are they a threat that must be contained before they destabilize everything we have built? Murmurs rippled through the assembly hall as different species voiced their opinions. Some were afraid of humanity's military capabilities. Others were intrigued by their willingness to fight for others, and many were simply confused by the idea of a species that would risk everything to help strangers. If I may address the council, Ambassador Shin said, rising from his chair. His voice carried clearly through the hall's translation systems, reaching every delegate in their own language. Honored representatives, Shin continued. I understand your concerns about my species. We are new to galactic civilization, and our actions in Althari space were unprecedented. But I want you to understand why we acted as we did. He activated a holographic display that showed images of Earth, its storms and earthquakes and dangerous wildlife all clearly visible. Humans come from what you classify as a Class 12 death world. Every day of our existence has been a struggle against a planet that actively tries to kill us. We learn to survive by working together, by protecting those who could not protect themselves, and by never giving up even when the odds seemed impossible. The display changed to show images of the human fleet during the battle for Althari space. Thousands of ships working in perfect coordination to defeat an enemy that outnumbered them. When we heard the Althari distress call, we didn't see an opportunity for conquest or expansion. We saw people who needed help, and we responded, the only way we knew how with everything we had. HFY Harmony, who had been invited to speak for the Althari, rose from his position at the survivor species table. The alien's crystalline form caught the light in the chamber, creating rainbows that danced across the walls as he moved. Honored, Council, the Althari said, his musical voice filled with emotion. 3 months ago, my people were facing complete extinction. The Krovar Empire had destroyed our defenses, occupied our worlds, and begun the systematic elimination of our population centers. We broadcast a desperate plea for help, not expecting any response. The hall fell silent as the alien continued, his testimony. The humans came to us as strangers with no promise of reward or advantage. They risked their lives and their ships to save people they had never met. In our darkest hour, when we had given up hope, they showed us that there are species in this galaxy who will fight for justice simply because it is right. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The concept of fighting wars to protect others was not unknown in galactic history, but it was rare enough to be remarkable. Dr. Yoon Hajin, who had been invited as humanity's scientific representative, stood to address the biological concerns that many species had raised about Deathworlders. I know that many of you are concerned about human aggression and our capacity for violence, Yoon said. These concerns are understandable, but I believe they are based on a misunderstanding of what makes humans dangerous. He activated another display that showed comparative biological data from different galactic species. Humans are not the strongest species in the galaxy, nor the fastest, nor the most intelligent. What makes us effective in combat is our ability to work together as a coordinated group. We fight as a single organism, rather than as individuals. And we have developed technologies and tactics that maximize the effectiveness of group cooperation. But that cooperation extends beyond warfare, Yoon continued. The same instincts that make us dangerous to enemies also make us protective of allies and civilians. We cannot help those who cannot help themselves, not because we want something in return, but because our evolutionary development has made it impossible for us to ignore calls for help. Intelligence Director Kang Seojin rose to address the security concerns that had been raised by several military-focused species. The Council has expressed concerns about humanity's military capabilities and our potential threat to galactic stability. Kang said, I want to be completely transparent about what we are capable of. The display changed to show the complete order of battle for the human fleet, including ship specifications and tactical capabilities. This is our entire military force, Kang continued. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. We are not hiding secret fleets or advanced weapons. What you see is what we have, and what we have is sufficient to defend ourselves and protect those who ask for our help. But I also want you to understand what we are not, she added. We are not conquerors. We have no interest in building an empire or subjugating other species. Our entire military doctrine is based on defense and protection, not conquest and expansion. The debate that followed lasted for hours as different species voiced their concerns and opinions about humanity's place in galactic civilization. Some wanted to quarantine human space to prevent their aggressive tendencies from spreading. Others wanted to form alliances with humanity to gain protection from hostile neighbors. A few species demanded that humans be given a seat on the Galactic Council immediately. Finally, Counselor Prime Harmony, the ancient leader of the Galactic Council, called for order in the chamber. This council has heard testimony from the humans and from those they have helped, the ancient being said in a voice that carried the authority of centuries. We have learned that a new species has emerged from the outer regions of the galaxy, one that possesses military capabilities unlike anything we have seen before. The chamber fell silent as everyone waited for the council's decision. The question is not whether humanity is dangerous, Harmony continued. All intelligent species are dangerous in their own ways. The question is whether they are dangerous to galactic civilization or dangerous to those who threaten galactic civilization. Based on the evidence presented, this council finds that humanity represents a stabilizing force in the galaxy. Their actions in Althari space demonstrate a commitment to protecting innocent life and opposing aggression. Therefore, the Galactic Council extends an invitation to humanity to join as full members of galactic civilization. The applause that followed was not universal, but it was genuine. Representatives from dozens of species stood to welcome humanity to the galactic community, while others remained seated and clearly unconvinced. Ambassador Shin stood to accept the invitation on behalf of his species. But before he could speak, his communication device chimed with an urgent message from Earth Command. He read the message quickly, and his expression grew serious. "Honored Council," Shin said, "I accept this invitation on behalf of humanity, but I must inform you that we have just received another distress call from a previously unknown species. The Kalari Republic is under attack by slavers, and they are requesting immediate assistance." A ripple of concern went through the assembly as delegates realized what this meant. "Will humanity respond to this call as they did to the Althari?" asked Councillor Vexithara. Ambassador Shin looked around the chamber at the faces of beings from across the galaxy, some hopeful, some fearful, all of them waiting to see what the Deathworlders would do next. "Yes," he said simply. "We will." 6 months later, construction began on New Geneva Station, a joint human-alien facility that would serve as humanity's embassy to the galaxy. The station was built in neutral space, designed by Althari architects and human engineers working together to create something that had never existed before. A permanent symbol of cooperation between species who had found each other in the vastness of space. Admiral Choi stood in the observation deck of the new station, watching as human and alien ships worked together to complete the construction. In the months since the liberation of Althari space, 12 more species had requested human protection from aggressive neighbors, while several militaristic empires had begun building coalitions to contain the Deathworld threat. "Admiral," Captain Nam reported over the communication system, "we're receiving another distress signal. This one